Welcome back, everyone. Over the last 4 videos, we've examined leadership behaviors, leadership styles, contingency leadership, and situational leadership. We've discussed how leaders adapt to different situations and different people. Today, we're going to see what happens when those theories meet reality. Critical incidents are the moments that define leaders. These are situations where lives are at risk, information is incomplete, emotions are high, and every decision carries significant consequences. Whether you're leading a patrol shift, a correctional facility, an emergency response team, or an investigative unit, your ability to remain calm and make sound decisions during a crisis will shape both the outcome of the incident and the confidence your team has in your leadership. So let's imagine it's 8:17 on a Tuesday morning. Dispatch broadcasts reports of shots fired at a local elementary school. Within minutes, patrol officers begin arriving. Parents rush towards the campus. Firefighters and paramedics stage nearby. News helicopters circle overhead. Social media is already spreading rumors. As a supervisor, everyone is looking to you. Your officers want direction. The public wants answers. Command staff wants updates. And the media wants information. How do effective leaders perform under this kind of pressure? That is the question we're going to answer today. So, as always, let's talk about our learning objectives. By the end of today's lecture, you'll be able to explain what makes critical incident leadership unique, identify the characteristics of effective crisis leaders, apply principles during emergencies, and evaluate leadership decisions made under intense pressure. Notice that today's focus is not tactics. It is leadership. No matter what type of emergency occurs, strong leadership often becomes the difference between an organized response and unnecessary chaos. So let's start at the beginning. What is a critical incident? So a critical incident is any event that threatens life, overwhelms normal operations, and requires immediate coordination and decision making. Examples include disasters, correctional facility disturbances, terrorist attacks, and large-scale public emergencies. What all of these events have in common is uncertainty. Information can change rapidly. Resources are limited. Time is compressed. And leaders must make decisions before they have every answer. And that is why preparation and leadership for these types of emergencies are so important. So why does this type of leadership matter in these types of incidents? During a crisis, people naturally look to leaders. They're looking for direction, they want reassurance, and most importantly, they want confidence. Your officers will often mirror your behavior. If you remain calm, they are more likely to remain calm. If you communicate clearly, they can focus on their responsibilities. But if a leader appears overwhelmed, uncertain, or disorganized, anxiety spreads quickly throughout the entire team. Leadership is contagious, but so is panic. The first 5 minutes. So the first few minutes of a critical incident are often the most important. Effective leaders focus on 5 priorities. First, they protect life. Second, they establish command. Third, they gather reliable information. Fourth, they deploy available resources. And finally, they begin communicating. Notice that solving the entire problem is not on this list. The goal is to stabilize the situation so better decisions can be made as additional information becomes available. Great leaders don't try to control everything immediately. They establish control over what they can. So an important thing to learn about when we talk about these types of incidents are the Incident Command System, ICS. And it is one of the most important tools available during major emergencies. ICS provides a standardized structure that allows multiple agencies to work together efficiently. Because think about it, in these types of emergencies, you're going to have paramedics, fire, police, and likely multiple police agencies. So you have to figure out how to centralize that leadership. Instead of everyone making independent decisions, responsibilities are divided among sections such as operations, planning, logistics, and finance. This structure improves accountability, it reduces confusion, and ensures resources are used effectively. Whether you're working with law enforcement, fire services, emergency medical personnel, or even emergency management, a common organizational structure allows everyone to work towards the same objective. One of the greatest myths about leadership is that good leaders always have all of the information before making decisions. They don't. In reality, leaders often make decisions with incomplete information, limited resources, and significant time pressure. Waiting for perfect information may actually make a situation worse. Effective leaders gather the best information available. They consult trusted advisors when possible, evaluate the risks, and make timely decisions. Leadership is not about perfection. It is about responsible decision-making under imperfect conditions. So let's talk about communication during a crisis. Communication may be the single most important leadership skill during a critical incident. People need information. Even when you don't have every answer, communicate what you know, what you're doing, and when additional information will become available. Silence creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty leads to rumors, and rumors will undermine public trust. Effective leaders communicate frequently, honestly, and consistently. Clear communication helps everyone focus on solving the problem instead of speculating about what is actually occurring. Another important aspect is emotional intelligence. So critical incidents test more than decision making. They test emotional intelligence. People are watching how leaders respond. That doesn't mean leaders ignore emotions. Instead, they manage them. Strong leaders remain composed, demonstrate empathy for victims and responders, and maintain professionalism throughout the entire incident. Remaining calm is not a sign that you don't care. It means you're providing the emotional stability your team needs to perform effectively. Let's consider an officer-involved shooting as a case study. The supervisor's responsibilities extend far beyond simply arriving at the scene. First, the supervisor should ensure everybody receives the necessary medical attention. Then they should secure the crime scene and protect evidence. It is important to separate involved officers when appropriate and notify the proper people up the chain of command, and then begin the required investigation. Throughout the process, leaders must balance compassion for their officers, their team, with transparency and accountability. Professional leadership builds confidence in both the investigation and the organization. And one of the biggest things that we are going to see working in this area is ethical leadership under pressure. Because every crisis is going to present an ethical challenge. And leaders constantly have to ask themselves 3 questions. Is this decision legal? Is it ethical? And will this decision maintain public trust? Sometimes the fastest solution is not the best solution. Sometimes the easiest decision isn't the most ethical. Strong leaders understand that how they respond during a crisis may be remembered long after the emergency has ended. So what happens if you need to lead multiple agencies on a scene? Large-scale emergencies almost always involve multiple organizations. You're going to have police officers, sheriff's deputies, firefighters, paramedics, emergency management personnel. Sometimes you'll have school officials and people from public works. And in a really big emergency, you may actually have federal agencies. So, successful leaders recognize that not one single agency can solve every problem. Collaboration, communication, and clearly defined responsibilities become essential for the success of disaster response and the response overall. And at that point, it's not just about the individual agency. Let's talk about another important aspect of critical incident response, and that is dealing with the media and public information. Today's leaders must recognize that every critical incident unfolds in front of cameras and smartphones. I know an officer who was involved in a fight, and he was struggling in the fight, and people were watching. And rather than call dispatch asking for additional officers or even getting involved, the first thing they did is they just took out their cameras and videotaped. And there's video out there of him saying, "Call my dispatch, please call my dispatch." So we have to just realize that's what people's first response is today. And this results in information spreading instantly. That's why organizations have a designated public information officer who is trained in dealing with the media. Leaders should communicate verified facts. They should avoid speculation, protect the integrity of ongoing investigations, and remain transparent wherever appropriate. Public confidence in the law enforcement and the criminal justice organizations depends not only on what leaders do, but also how they communicate and handle community questions. And another important aspect of these incidents is officer wellness. We've talked about how leadership is not about a job title. Leadership is about dealing with people. And leadership responsibilities, they are going to continue after the immediate emergency has ended. A critical incident can have a lasting psychological effect on first responders. Think about, new parents seeing dead babies, seeing people killed in all gruesome sorts of ways, responding to terrorist attacks. Effective leaders, they check on their personnel. They encourage them to use peer support services. They connect employees with counseling resources. In the Inland Empire, there's a great group called the Counseling Team that focuses specifically on law enforcement and first responders. Effective leaders are going to monitor for signs of stress, burnout, or trauma. Taking care of your people is not a distraction from leadership. Taking care of your people is leadership. So we have another case study. Imagine a rapidly spreading wildfire is threatening several neighborhoods. Police officers are coordinating evacuations. Firefighters are battling the actual fire. And then emergency shelters have to open across the community. As the incident commander, your priorities include protecting lives, coordinating multiple agencies, communicating evacuation orders, and allocating limited resources. Notice how every leadership concept we've discussed this week comes together in one event. So one of the other things that leaders make in these types of situations, they are mistakes. And it can be even experienced leaders make mistakes during a crisis. Because think about it, you don't have that time to sit and think about how you're going to respond. You just have to respond. So some leaders delay important decisions while waiting for perfect information. There's no such thing. Others fail to communicate frequently enough. You get that tunnel vision. Some micromanage experienced personnel instead of trusting them to perform their assignments. Let your people do what they do. Others become so focused on solving the incident that they forget about the physical and emotional well-being of their teams. You have to be able to recognize these common mistakes so that you don't avoid them, in repeated situations. So let's review some important lessons. First, critical incidents demand calm, confident leadership. Second, effective leaders establish command. They communicate clearly and make timely decisions with the information available. Third, leadership includes caring for both the mission and the people carrying it out. Finally, preparation, trust, and communication are the foundations of successful crisis leadership. Throughout today's lecture, we focused on leading effectively during a crisis. But once the emergency is over, another challenge begins. How do leaders evaluate whether the decisions they made were not only effective, but also ethical? In our next lesson, we'll explore ethical leadership and public trust, examining how integrity, accountability, and transparency shape successful criminal justice organizations. I'll see you in the next video.